Okay, welcome to Clear Vision Wednesday. I'm Claudia Mühlenweg. I'm known as the Holistic Vision Coach. I help thousands of people improve their eyesight naturally, and I go live here every week to educate you on an aspect of vision that you probably never considered or never heard about. Many times we have guest experts coming. Today I'm joined, and I will bring her on stage in a moment, by one of my coaches who is working alongside me in my natural clear vision courses, and also she works a lot with private clients. The reason this topic is so important is because, and that's why we call it the number one root cause of vision problems your eye doctor doesn't even consider or doesn't see, because this is something they look at the eyeball, right? The eye doctor looks at the eyeball. But a lot of times our eyes are part of the brain. Our vision is a sense, and it's connected to the nervous system, to everything in the body. And what does the body speak? What language does the body speak? Emotions. So if we don't resolve traumatic or even just stressful emotions, they get stuck in our body. And that doesn't mean that everybody that has emotional distress will develop vision problems. We all react differently, but there is a high correlation between certain vision problems and even eye diseases and emotions. So let me bring her on stage. Welcome to the show, Trisha Kirby.
Hi, Claudia. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you.
So, Trisha, you are an intuitive vision coach. You're an energy healer. You work with bioresonance. You work on all these, what some people might consider woo-woo levels, right? But you really get results that way.
Yeah.
Um, and for my programs, you do these, what we call inner game, for my natural key vision course, by the way, which starts tomorrow. So first of all, subscribe to this channel. Don't forget that. And then learn more about the natural key vision program. It's starting tomorrow. And one of the big things that we address in this program, and that's a lot of the work that you do in these so-called inner game calls, is really looking at, like, how are the emotions or the emotional states connected to their vision problems. Like, we always ask, what happened a year or two before you got glasses or before your vision got blurry, right?
Yeah.
You want to add anything before we dive in?
I want to say this. Okay, welcome everyone on the call. And as you're listening to us discuss these eye issues, like maybe some of the causation factors and some of the things that people are doing to sort of replicate or keep the paradigm going that's creating the vision problem, please use compassion for yourself and not judgment or criticism. And this is for both yourself and others. If you see yourself in what we're talking about, don't judge yourself for this. Really listen with a gentle, compassionate mind and share and intake it as information only, and just kind of absorb it that way without any judgment. So we could tend to judge ourselves for stuff, especially with vision conditions. So just go gently on the call today.
Thank you so much. And I think what you said is very important. Our number one goal is, and that's what we do in our coaching programs, is always to, like, suggest that idea that that could be something related, or somebody immediately knows that's what happened. And sometimes it takes a little bit of digging to, like, connect back to that time and to really connect the dots. And you really help people with your intuitive skills to really hone in on what it was. And then from there, we can then actually take action to resolve this. So anyway, let's get started. And I think the way we want to do this, we're going to talk about each vision condition, like a little bit about what are the generic things or the feelings or the emotional states that most often are connected to this condition. And obviously, the higher, let's say with refractive errors, the higher somebody is nearsighted, this might apply to them way more than if you just have a teeny tiny bit of blur, or with farsightedness, right, or reading glasses. If you're really farsighted, you have maybe more of this than somebody who just starts with a little bit of blur at the near point. But we want you all to really be curious and listening in and be like, that really makes sense. I can relate to that. And then you will also give stories. Obviously, we're not going to mention any names, but real life stories where, like, going a little bit more into specifics, and then also giving tips for each scenario, what you can do. One of them is joining my Magic Vision program, obviously. But if you just want to get started doing something and being more aware of this, we give you tips, strategies that are simple to implement that you can help you start helping yourself. I don't know you, Trisha, about you, but from my experience, usually we need somebody else to help us. That was certainly the case for me. A coach, or sometimes it might even be a therapist, depending on the situation. So let's get into it. And I think the way we're going to do this is that we start with the so-called refractive errors, which is nearsightedness, farsightedness, presbyopia, which is a form of farsightedness, where what they call old age sight, and astigmatism, before we go into, like, eye diseases, right? Does that sound good?
Yeah.
All right. So let's start by nearsightedness. I mean, we have an epidemic of myopia going on in the world. In some southeastern countries like Singapore, I think 93% of children and youth are now nearsighted. In China, it's somewhere in the 80%, something like this. And we have a rising trend all over the world, also here in the United States and in Europe. So what have you noticed with working with people that are nearsighted? What kind of emotional states can you describe?
So much of nearsightedness starts in childhood. Not always, but a lot of it starts in childhood. And it manifests in people who have had some form of like the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences. And what it turns into is a fear of facing the future. So you'll start out with, you have some kind of fear in childhood. Maybe there's a divorce in the family. Maybe you were moving, you changed schools, you got bullied, there was instability, there was some kind of distrust. But then it ends up translating into, now I don't trust anything in the world. And you're actually literally withdrawing yourself from the world. And that ends up being this nearsighted, myopic condition in the eyes. And I mean, it's almost universal that there's going to be some form of fear, overthinking things, like an analysis paralysis, over planning. Like I have to control
What
everything.
about worry? What about worry? Like
Yeah,
anxiety.
absolutely.
Anxiety is
Yeah.
also rampant, right?
Yep. Yep.
So
All of those.
super interesting. So there's this fear of the future, this concern of like always worst case scenario. And like you said, it often starts in childhood when we just don't feel safe. And there's something that we adopt to this kind of belief. So can you give us like a story or some like, maybe one, we have probably hundreds, you have hundreds, but give us maybe one or two stories about how that showed up in somebody who was in their adult years, right? Because we work mostly with adults now, over 50, I would say. Most of our clients are over 50. So,
Yeah. Well, this one's a little bit younger. She's in her 40s. I have a client in her 40s who she didn't have the best relationship with her mom growing up. And there was definitely some back and forth, didn't feel safe in the world. And then on top of that, ended up getting bullied in school. And so by fifth, sixth grade, she was in glasses, and then the myopia got stronger and stronger and stronger. And then she just ended up thinking like basically pushing outward, pushing everything in the world. She wanted to withdraw from the world and wanted the world to go away from her. So, and she was in naturally clear vision, and what she ended up working on, so we worked on Bates practices, which she was getting from the course with you. And then with me, we were working on feeling safe, learning to trust herself in life, trust the future again, and consciously creating a reality, a world where she felt safe in the world. Like she felt like, okay, I can trust things. It's really okay. And then, so all of it's improved. So within about 6 months to a year's time, now she's really enjoying her job again. She had kind of withdrawn from her job too. So she's an entrepreneur, but she's creating new careers there. She is in a relationship now, which she wasn't in before. She has a better relationship with her mom. I mean, everything smoothed out, but it really took looking at the whole picture. If you just did the one thing, I don't know if we would have made the same progress as if we hadn't like addressed everything.
and her myopia has improved as well,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Okay, and I wanted everybody that might not really know. So when we talk about myopia and nearsightedness, it's somebody that can see close up really well and far is blurry. And Martin Brofman wrote a wonderful book, and he did a lot of work on this emotional level as too. And he describes it as this kind of idea of a bubble. So if you think of like how far can you reach your arm? So if you have, I think arm's length is about, depending on the arm, how long they are, about 60, let me see, yeah, it's about 60 centimeters. If you have a meter or 100 centimeters, that's about -1. So, this is 60 centimeters or 2 feet is about, I would say it's like more like like two, like a little bit, but like maybe a 1.5, 175 myopia. But basically describe this idea because you see everything close so well. And there's more of a concern with like me and my things and what goes wrong for me, right? Because your clarity zone is in this bubble, and you said she wanted to withdraw from the world because it's the close world. This bubble feels safe and everything outside feels not safe, right? Is that something that would maybe, okay.
Yeah, so cultivating a sense of self-confidence, like so you feel safe in the world and you have a confidence in yourself in the world, and learning to participate in the world instead of withdrawing from the world. So the more that you sort of put yourself out there, and that comes up a lot. Like I'm always saying to people with myopia, like get out there and join some meetup groups and get involved and put yourself, and there's so much fear around that. But I'm like, no, it's going to be a good thing. You don't gain courage and then go out into the world. You go out into the world and the courage comes because you took the steps to overcome your fears.
So little baby steps. Do you have a message or mantra? Sometimes I feel like a little like guideline or something I can say to myself. Like, because I think we did one thing in Natural Clear Vision where you said you worked with somebody and you said, repeat after me, it's safe to see clearly,
Yeah.
or it's safe to see. And she said it's not safe to see. So there was this kind of, right?
It's
That's what I remember from one of the sessions that we did as a group.
yeah, it's safe to see and it's safe to be seen.
Mm, great.
Both of
All right.
those. And if you know how to muscle test, you can say affirmations for the eyes and muscle test whether or not you actually believe them. Because if you're just randomly saying affirmations and on some subconscious or unconscious level, you don't believe what you're saying, they're not helping you. So be sure that you actually believe what you're saying. And if you can, either tweak the affirmation in a way where you do believe it and then cultivate where you're strong saying these affirmations.
So muscle testing, I'm not an expert, but I know I learned it and this works for me. You basically, I learned this method. When you say a few things that are true. I am Claudia. My name is Claudia. My sister's name is Andrea. Like you do a few things and then you say something. And then if you like, and I always thought initially that was total woo-woo, but it's so true when you say something you don't believe or that you know is wrong. You ought to say then the name, you do the wrong thing. You're saying, my name is Andrea. And like, it doesn't stick. And so practicing it with a few known yeses and nos is it gives you a good way to trust that this works. And then I love that what you said, because if we say something that doesn't align with us, it's not gonna, because our inner mind is like, no, that's not true. All right, let's switch gears. Let's switch. So the most common things that we find is nearsightedness and then what's called presbyopia. And we're going to do farsightedness as well. Presbyopia is a kind of form of farsightedness when you get into your 40s, 50s, 60s. You kind of, you struggle more. You might have always been able to see everything clearly at any distance. And now you get older and there's more of a problem with looking up close. And that can even happen when you are nearsighted. But usually it happens more with people that always had great vision or that were already farsighted. But tell us a little bit about what have you found with, so presbyopia is more related to older age, a form of farsightedness, where usually the middle distance is still seen pretty well and the far distance is initially seen really well. But it's just the close up, the computer and reading is more of a problem. What have you noticed with that in general, like speaking?
So I have a lot of clients. I because of the classes there is like a not a 50-50 split, but a lot of people are in the myopia and presbyopia. The presbyopia one makes me a little bit sad because it's a little bit of being stuck in the past. So a nostalgia, like, okay, the best days of my life are over now, and maybe they're retired and they're not feeling appreciated or respected like they used to. So those are some of the patterns that show up with presbyopia. If I were giving an example, it's a woman or man who is retired. So, and they're not like actively working anymore in their retirement. They just literally completely retire, and maybe they're just having fun and stuff, but there's a deep sense of a lack of purpose in life. Not that you have to go out and get a job, but there's just like, there needs to be a reason to still be here on the planet. I've seen presbyopia in folks where they lost their spouse or partner. So, and again, that's that nostalgia for the past, like I wish things were still, my spouse was still there. I wish we were still having fun together. They may have health issues, like the spouse may have health issues, and they're worried about them getting sick and not, like living a long life with them together. I've also seen a pattern where thinking of someone who actually multiple people where the children moved away, just like being adult kids, they move different places, no particular reason, but they're just too far away. And again, it's like the person with presbyopia ends up not feeling appreciated in the world. So like they're not getting the appreciation and acknowledgement from a job anymore, and they're not getting it on a regular basis from their kids, other than like maybe by phone. But we need personal, physical interactions one-on-one. So where I've seen, this reverses, I think, almost easier than myopia. I think that people get better out of this really quickly. As long as it's not like too high, if do the practices that are taught in naturally clear vision, of course, and that's the main thing that we're talking about. But it's really about cultivating an excitement in the life that we have right now. So I always tell people, I'm like, get out there and do stuff, like take classes and plan trips and develop, cultivate friendships. And when I've seen people do these steps, they drop diopters really quickly in the glasses and quite often get completely out of the presbyopia glasses, and they don't go back into them again. I mean, they stay out of them, but they have to be out there living life and staying involved with life and asking themselves on a day-to-day basis, what can I do that helps me be happy in life, helps me have joy, helps me smile, helps me have humor. Get in touch with your personal passions and dreams. Like, this is a time where in January you could be like, if you're doing a vision board at any time of the year, you could be making your ideas of what your dreams are for the year, and that kind of thing will help your vision as well.
I love that. And I think there's also, my background is farsightedness, and I would say also obviously had presbyopia initially I think it was like my mid 40s initially when things weren't as clear anymore. And I feel like what I find also with the work, and let me know if you agree, but there's this, we don't want to see things up close. We want to focus more on how do our children are doing, our grandchildren, how is like what everybody else is doing. We're like, versus looking at I remember when my ex-husband and I divorced, and I was just 40 or like early 40s, and by the time like my kids went to counseling, and the counselor would ask me, how are you doing? And like, oh, I'm okay. Like I wasn't even, because it's at the point, back then I was already doing vision coaching, so my vision was better, but there was definitely the sense of when you're presbyopic and you look in the mirror, everything is blurry. So you can't even put your makeup on really because you can't see anything clearly, and you can't do it with glasses really because, right, you
Mm.
need a magnifying mirror really. And then you see all the wrinkles, and you're like, oh my God, even worse. I don't even want to see that. So there's definitely this, what you said, this kind of idea of aging. Like I'm feeling like, God, it's getting worse. I have so many wrinkles. I look old. And that's when that need for like maybe, Botox, or where people like really feel like they need to kind of try to youthify themselves. I just made up that word. Do you feel that too? That's this kind of, like, I literally don't want to see myself because I'm not, especially up close. From far away is okay, but not up close.
100%, absolutely. And that's something too, like what is your self-talk when you're in the mirror? I do some mirror work with people too, and I have clients that can't even look at themselves naked in a mirror. And because I always say to people, like, look at yourself in the mirror and tell yourself that you love yourself, and they won't do it. And I'm like, okay, get a tiny little mirror that's only 1 inch tall, so you just see your eyes, and then just look into your own eyes and say to your eyes, I love you. You're safe in the world. You're beautiful. And then slowly expand and get a bigger mirror till you can like stand in front of a mirror with your whole body fully naked and say, I love myself. Yeah, but
I
that
think
aging thing is a big one. That's a big one.
and in other cultures where where when we look at the blue zones, right, where the elders really get respected, I think there's also way less presbyopia in the old societies. And one thing, by the way, switching gears, is like what I recommend usually, I don't know what you think, is and that my teacher actually recommended that to me as I was doing the certification, because I was still struggling with presbyopia back then. Not so much more with the farsightedness, but the presbyopia was still a little bit of a problem. And she said, just what did you used to do as a kid? And I remember I would do coloring, right? We had these squares that we would fill in and connect the dots. And so I think at this point, it's also like come back to things you used to do in childhood that you liked. And even if it's blurry, but what presbyopia happens, we always push the near point away. So where can we do things as a tip? Where can you do things at the near point where it's okay if it's a little blurry, because then you relax, you find joy, and then things will actually clear up. But you have to also allow that. Don't do that when you write an important email, or when you, you don't want to do that without glasses. But where are things that you can do at the near point where it doesn't really matter if it's a perfect thing, and relax into that without the glasses on. So that's something else I would want to add. All right, let's move on to the next one. So related to presbyopia is true hyperopia or farsightedness. That's what I had as a kid, and actually in adult life too, but I was able to reverse that. But that's really when it's almost like the clarity is all the way at the horizon. It's like nothing is clear, even in like 10, 15, 20 feet, it's not really clear. It's almost like it is like the clarity is like so far away. So true hyperopia is usually pretty rare, and that usually manifests as people having, for like close up, they have something like in the round of like 6, 7, 8 diopters of magnification for looking up close, and maybe something like 4 or 5 or something for distance. So it's way higher than what most people have that have reading glasses initially. That might be like anywhere from +1, +3, then you get into bifocals. And usually when you have the presbyopia blurriness in the distance, it's more like what I usually see is like more like 2.5, 275, and then the near point maybe up to 5. But it's the true hyperopic people have much higher levels of plus lenses. So tell us a little bit what you've noticed with that personality.
So, and again, there's always a little bit of variation in here too, but this one tends to correlate with people who have anger, have some aggression issues in them. They or have a need for distracting themselves. They're sort of out there and avoiding the present. They're kind of almost, I don't want to say it running away out of fear, but really just running away from whatever this is. I've had clients where I've seen this actually more often in men, because you think about it, if you're a leader in the world, you're a visionary, you're looking into the distance, like you want that clarity for the future. But this also translates into a restlessness that becomes a workaholism. Like they're the workaholics. They want to be doing stuff all the time. They don't want problems, so they tend to avoid problems. And then this turns into an escapism tendency. Usually work, but in relationships too. So how you work on healing this, obviously the practices too, the naturally clear vision practices, and then energetically, emotionally, mentally grounding yourself in the present moment and being okay being in the present moment, not giving yourself up to distractions like television and scrolling on social media and watching Netflix and eating. Like there's all these different ways that we distract ourselves. That's the kind of thing that you want to be fully in the present moment, aware and feel safe in the present moment, instead of this mental escapism. And then addressing your life challenges instead of running away from them, and then cultivating a sense of inner stability. That's a theme that you're going to see throughout all of these, but really feeling safe in the world is a big one. So, and doing all of those things improves the farsightedness.
While you were talking, I was like, oh my God, that's so mean. For me, definitely frustration is a big deal. Like, I remember when my kids were little and we would go to parent nights and like, can we just stop those endless discussions? Can we just make a decision and move on with it? And I still see that sometimes myself. Like, I'm an extroverted person more now. I like, conferences, like being around people, but there's a point when things get discussed to like, oh man, I'm like and I also notice when I'm in meetings with people, and this I first became aware of this in my teacher training because there was me as a farsighted person, one other gentleman, and 2 nearsighted people. And I always noticed that the farsighted people, we always sat at the windows because we just want to see outside and have our escape route planned. And the nearsighted people like to look at like look inside the room. So they're looking more. This is also, by the way, everybody watching, like just notice those tendencies. Another thing I want to throw in just for fun is that when you look at handwriting, I remember being at a conference next to a very famous business coach, and he had this book and he was writing like, and I'm like, he wore glasses. I'm like, well, I'm like saying, how farsighted are you? He's like, how did you know? I'm like, I just look at your handwriting. And then you look at nearsighted people, they write like in the
Yeah.
tiniest print. And it's like, so that could also be another way of like, if you're farsighted, maybe can you practice a little bit like writing a little smaller, or I think my internet is crapping out. It's kind of wonky, but or like just doing more detailed things. And if you're nearsighted, can you just do things like just write more loosely, relaxed, even if it looks a little bit more, nobody else can read it, it's fine, but just kind of doodling like in bigger, like on bigger pieces of paper. That's also something that I notice. Or like when we do coloring, for instance, which is a great practice, the nearsighted person, I always say, go over the lines, just color over the lines because they're like very precise and it has to be perfect. And then the farsighted people are like, like, can you be a little bit more inside the lines? So if that makes sense to you guys watching, let us know because there's definitely a correlation to like the habits that you have. So All
And
right, let's.
I do that too. Like, I gotta say, I hear myself in you, and you've said this before too. Like, because that painting behind me, like all my art is all this like really precise lines and stuff. And you're like, that's not the best for your vision. You know that? And I'm
Oh,
just,
it's beautiful, but my point is like sometimes exploring,
yeah,
being Jackson Pollock, right? Getting the brush
yeah,
and throwing the
yep.
paint at the wall, that would be something that a nearsighted person would really benefit from, and a farsighted person would benefit from. Not, I'm not saying do the hardest thing right away, but find like something to slowly improve that ability. So I'm not saying some of these adult coloring books that you see, they're very fine. So I would never recommend that to a presbyopic or farsighted person. I would say get those children's books from the discount table where they do connect the dots where you have to find the next number, or do coloring books if you like coloring. Don't do it if you hate it, but if you like it, maybe do it with your left hand, or do it like, do it with it where it's pretty easy, not like super intricate designs if you're farsighted, right? Okay, let's move on. Astigmatism, which is often, and astigmatism, by the way, is an unevenness most of the case of the cornea, where one curve is flatter, one is steeper, like an American football, compared to like a basketball, what's a perfect dome shape, right? When you think about this, it's a perfect dome shape. Versus if you pull different unevenly, the cornea will be a little distorted. And so, an astigmatism can be nearsighted or farsighted, and it could actually compound your nearsightedness if you're already nearsighted, and in your prescription the cylinder is also minus. That makes your nearsightedness worse versus a plus astigmatism. If you're nearsighted, that reduces your nearsightedness a little bit. And the other way around with farsighted people, right? If it's both plus, it makes your farsightedness more worse. And if you're farsighted with a negative nearsighted astigmatism cylinder, that makes your farsightedness a little bit worse. But basically, astigmatism is can be described as different focal points. So the focal point doesn't fall in front or behind the retina, like with near or farsightedness, but it's like that's different. It's almost like you have three beams of light pointing in different directions, like the laser beams that you see often at like movie premieres, right? Like one goes this way, like it's all over the place. So, what have you found? And maybe before you say this, I had very pretty bad astigmatism in my right eye, and I always struggled with decision making, and I always struggled with focusing, and I always was the kind of not clinical, but ADD, kind of like jumping from task to task and, oh, let me do this, let me do this. So is that something that you've also noticed, or tell us a little bit about what you've
Oh,
noticed?
100%. And it can be big things like tasks, but it can be little things too. Like if you're on the computer right now, how many tabs do you have open?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's little stuff. It's not big stuff always. Sometimes it's big stuff, and sometimes it's little tiny things like, oh, I have 20 tabs open because I'll get back to that one someday, and it's so it's like multitasking. If you want to be doing two and three things, like you can't just do the dishes, you have to be listening to something or actually hearing, or watching TV, or like you're always doing, if you're watching a show, you need to be knitting or doing something with your hands, like this multitasking tendency. It's also about being indecisive and playing a role that you think other people think that you should be, and
Mm.
ultimately gets down to really not always connecting to your true self. So I saw this, I see this show up so often, and honestly, it's me too. I mean, I have a little bit of astigmatism too, even though I'm constantly getting it better, and then it slides back again because I don't always change my behavior. But I've seen several people who have a really high astigmatism, like unusual. And what I've seen as a pattern in them is they're super intelligent, like really, really smart people, and typically have done one and two and three and four different careers in their lifetime, like totally different careers. They love consuming information. They're the people like, I want to take another course and I want to get another certification. Does that sound like me? It is me too. But I'm talking about other people here, always wanting to learn more and then kind of spreading themselves too thin. Like, what should I learn next? What should I do? And then they get into this struggle with decision making. Like, I don't know if I want to do that, or I want to do that, or I want to do that. And again, that's going to reinforce this astigmatic condition in your vision. So recovering from that, reconnect with who you are in your heart, like who you really are, like your inner truth. Make choices from your heart and not based on any kind of external approval. Start learning how to cultivate your intuition, and most of all, trust your intuition, and then developing true focus. So we're not having to multitask 15 things at once. I'm going to focus on one task. I'm going to breathe, and I'm going to do it well. And that can help heal astigmatism and help improve astigmatism. But of course, obviously, we in naturally clear vision, teach a lot of different things to help improve vision, and one of them is astigmatism. Once I learned how all the different ways that I could heal, and I heal it in myself, I'm learning it, and then I'm on a regular basis improving it, and then I backslide a little bit, and then I improve it again. So every time I'm always getting better and better and better, and I have full faith that I'm going to be completely, some days I am completely out of it. I can tell all my glasses have the astigmatism removed, because that's something that we learn how to do in the course, which I love. And I can't wait to actually go to an eye doctor one day and be like, you can take that out because I don't need it.
Yeah, so I mean, here's the thing too. I love that we had many students who completely eliminated, and the eye doctor couldn't measure it anymore.
Yep.
So definitely in natural vision, we also talk about posture. This is all based on research. Posture as a component. So it's not all emotional, but emotions always play a role. I would say at least in over 80% of the cases. But sometimes, sometimes you could also get, let's say, we will talk about cataracts in a moment. You can also get a cataract by having a physical blow to your head. So there's always the physical level as well. There's the mental level, but the emotional level is the level that the eye doctors don't know or don't know anything about and don't look at. And they also don't ask you those questions, right? They don't ask you like, how do you feel about it? Are you feeling safe? Are you looking for like, they don't ask you those questions. They don't have time to ask you those questions, to be
And
honest.
I know that on the angle of astigmatism, like mine goes with the rule, meaning, so I learned that from you, that by looking at the angle of my astigmatism, I could tell which ways I was kind of overdoing my vision. And it was the side to side ways, because I'm reading all the time. I'm always like consuming more course information.
So the 180 0 degree and the axis is with the rule, and the 90 vertical
and exactly, that's exactly mine. That is exactly mine. And so I have worked on, cultivating a comfort zone in the other angles and not so much with the side to side one. And that has, I think all of it together though, like if you do all of the things that we're talking about, you make progress so much faster. And that's what I love.
Exactly.
Okay.
Absolutely. So yeah, so in natural vision in the program that starts tomorrow, we definitely address all these levels. But let's continue. Let's go over the rest. And actually, before we go to eye diseases, I have a question. So Kay Dunstoff on YouTube asked, what if one eye is myopic and the other one is presbyopic? So what if one eye is more nearsighted? And I have my thoughts on this, but what do you think?
Hang on a second. I'm going to look intuitively for a second. I'm getting the feeling like of being pulled in different directions, but it's that my eyes are not teaming up and being friends together with each other. And I would even go a little deeper, and you could probably talk about this too, about male-female relationships in the eyes and in the world. But
I
go ahead.
100% agree. And I asked her, she hasn't responded, if it's something that was always there or if that's a new thing. Because presbyopia, presbyopia, the old age side, like I said, can also happen when you're nearsighted, especially people that had LASIK. They have that far vision engraved on their cornea, and now at some point it's with that strong correction that they never needed for the near point, but now it's in the eye, you can't remove it. Then we'll need class lenses to compensate for that. So there could be a case of presbyopia in addition to nearsightedness, but it could also be what is either natural or monovision. So monovision is a condition where one eye looks up close, good, well, whichever one, and then usually the dominant eye is the one that looks really good far. And sometimes that's done with contact lenses or LASIK surgery or with cataract lens replacement surgery. We're not a big fan of that, and we can actually do a whole episode on that and give you lots of stories what we've seen as problems. One of them losing their depth perception, but then the eyes are never partners, like you said, they're never friends, and our vision is designed to be a balanced place from both eyes working together. But that's a different episode. So, but I see what you're saying. So basically, there's a disparity, there's an imbalance. It's almost like with one leg you can hop and with the other one you can jog, whatever. It's like a hobbledy. So you're not aligned and not grounded. So we don't recommend it, but sometimes naturally one eye is a little better up close and one eye is a little bit better further away. And I think I do see that, not normal, but I see it's common that sometimes one eye is a half diopter or something better. But if you see a huge discrepancy between the eyes, that could also be amblyopia. That could be what's called lazy eye, where you actually had true diplopia, double vision, when then the brain was like, I don't like to see two images all the time. And then one eye just gets kind of turned off by the brain and deteriorates and kind of loses some of the vision. And do we have that in our talk today, amblyopia?
I don't think we put that one in there, but I want to say
That's
something about
okay.
when I have spoken with students and clients that have a natural discrepancy where there's like several diopters between the, I always ask, and like first of all, I have a chat with the whatever eye it is, but I ask the person, when did this start in your past and what was going on? Because almost 100% of the time that tracks back to some trauma in childhood. I mean, almost all eye issues track back to some kind of something that happened that you thought was significant. As an adult, you may look back on it and go, that wasn't significant. That wasn't nothing. It was like some little tiny thing, but your body felt not safe in the world, felt afraid, couldn't escape, whatever it was. But there's something there. And so working with healing those mental, emotional issues from the past, those adverse childhood experiences can really help move you forward more quickly in your vision progress.
Yeah, and I worked with a client once who was farsighted and had amblyopia and developed that in childhood. Usually, in most cases, it does develop in childhood. And when we did some of the deep inner work, he realized, oh my God, one of my eyes is stuck in the past and the other eye is always in the future.
Oh
That
no.
was also interesting because he's like, that is just my eye from like when I was a boy. And the other eye is like, doing all the big things I want to do in the future. So there was a total despair that none of the eyes were in the present moment. And you talked about that with farsightedness too, that we're never in the present moment. And eyesight, not vision, eyesight can only happen in the present moment. We can have foresight and imagination and visions in the future. And we can have hindsight and memories in the past. But the act of physically seeing with the eyes is a present moment thing. And if you never do that, of course, there is a blur, right? Okay, we have been going for a while. Hopefully, this is helpful. Type in the chat also on YouTube if this is helpful. So let's look at some of the eye diseases that we usually find. Let's start with cataracts. Cataract is one of those, that most eye doctor says everybody gets cataracts. You're 60 years old, usually 60, 65. That's just normal. Everybody gets them. So what are your thoughts on cataracts and what can be one of the emotional root causes that leads to this?
So cataracts show up. It's seeing a dark future ahead, or not seeing any future ahead at all, like not having a faith that you're going to have a great future. I see this one a lot in folks that are late 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. I can give an example of, it's actually a friend of mine. She was college professor, had sort of a semi-forced retirement, and then her children, or adult children, not for a bad reason, but just good reasons, were moving away to different jobs and different careers. She felt was losing her life purpose, and big one, not feeling appreciated anymore in the world. Remember, we talked about that before, not feeling appreciated in a job or a purpose, but not feeling appreciated by family as well. And then this wasn't her, but this can also correlate with concerns about a dark future in terms of world problems, so like political climate. I fear for people right now who are losing it on Facebook and social media and watching the news and reading things and getting really upset about what they're seeing in the world. I'm not saying that's wrong to get upset, but I'm saying be really careful, because you might be impacting your vision by thinking these thoughts like, oh my God, the world's all going down the toilet, I also see it in feeling lonely, having a focus on what's wrong in life, like maybe you have health issues, or maybe you don't know what you want to, maybe you're worried about going blind, or you're worried about becoming a burden on people, or there's a lot with worry. So again, it's not seeing a future that's like bright and happy, and it's joyful and it's wonderful. So all of those things. So how do you get better with this one? Finding things that bring joy in your life, cultivating outside activities and hobbies, cultivating friendships. Big one, feel supported in life by, I always say it's better if you feel supported by yourself first, rather than looking for other people to support you. Because I mean, big picture in the world, people can move away, people can get upset with you, people can pass away, but you want your internal support to be there, but then cultivate exterior social and community support as well, family and friends. Creating an inner dialogue in your brain that's neutral to positive. I find, and this is true of almost all the vision conditions, there is some amount of a critical voice in the head, yapping to us, pushing us down. So we want to have like a more positive voice and be affirming with our inner dialogue to ourselves. So that voice in your head, we want that to be positive, to be affirming, or minimally to be neutral. I always say reduce your consumption of the news, whether that's on social media or on television or the radio or whatever. Like if it's negative, stay away from it. and get your news. You can get your news other places, but I actually put people on what I call a beauty diet, where you have to go out and like look at flowers and look at art and look around your house and have like things that look organized and beautiful, but have little spotlights of beauty in your life, and literally feel the energy of the beautiful, whatever you're looking at, it coming into your eyes, because our eyes are light receivers. So we want the beauty in the world to enter our eyes that way. So really for cataracts, it's I want to see beauty in the world. I want to have a joyful life. I say plan events, plan trips, plan theater things, plan get-togethers where you have dinner with your family and friends. Like plan things to look, keep it that way. Say it that way. I'm looking forward to this. And then, and really see the beauty in the world. And we have had a number of students, early stage cataracts, completely reverse their cataracts, only using the practices in naturally clear vision, and of course, making the little mental emotional changes.
And doing this in that game work.
And
So
game
I think cataract sounds like it's really, and it's like what we talked about, presbyopia, not feeling appreciated, like feeling the best is behind you. I think with 65, kids out of the house, maybe divorced. Now you, like you said, loneliness, the sense of like, what am I still useful for? More and more health issues are usually coming at that time. And so I 100% can relate to, not personally, but from what I've heard working with people, like what can make you happy and excited? And I think a gratitude meditation would be another one of my tips, like just being incredibly gratitude and feeling so. And I do that every morning because I do wake up too sometimes, like, you know, what today is like challenging or whatever, but really feeling immensely grateful for the support that we love, that we have, because everybody is somewhere loved. And it might not feel like you have this best spouse in the world that tells you every day how great you are or whatever, or your kids telling you, mom, you're the best. I don't know what you guys, but most daughters don't say that all the time. But it's like really cultivating it within, because, and I say this to myself every morning, I love you. And I just say, I love you, because sometimes if I say the word Claudia, then I might be like, eh. But if I just say I love you, I have that resonance, because that's true. I get, it's just, I say I love you. And so in a way, it's a way to have these beautiful sound waves and our own voice, which is relaxing to hear that. So find a way where you can. I love gratitude meditations. We had David Gandelman on the other day, a beautiful meditation teacher, one of my favorites, on Inside Timer. It's all free. So you can find meditations that really set you up for that positive, grateful state, even if you feel like the world goes to shit. Like, I mean, because here's the other thing, focusing on what you can control, and what we can really control is our own behavior, our own emotions, not control them, but be proactive about them. And then, be of service to your friends and family, because they found in studies, volunteer work, like especially here with the LA fires, volunteer work, being there for others actually helps us as the giver to feel almost better than when you receive something. So giving, volunteering, whatever you can, money, time, energy, whatever it is, will really help you feel more connected. So I mean, I live in Los Angeles. A lot of times everything is by car, especially in the US, generally speaking, right? It's not as easy to run into people like you would maybe do in Europe. So we have to sometimes make more of an effort to connect with people. And I hear my mom saying, as an example, she just turned 89 yesterday, and she said all the time, because her neighbor, like, I don't want to go into all the personal details, but basically there's some health crisis. I'm like, well, find out how you can support them. Well, they never call me. I'm always the one calling. I'm like, so she's stuck, and she's farsighted, cataracts, all these things. She's stuck in this, like, well, I'm always the one reaching out versus, but I'm like, that's okay, but she could really use your help right now. So sometimes I think we have to get off that, like, well, I'm doing X and that person, like, and maybe some friendships are gone and they're done and you're over them, that's fine. But if you really care about somebody, don't start a list of like counting how many times you reached out and how many times they reached out, because I think that's another thing that we might do as we get older, more resentfulness, more frustration. Anyway, great.
I want to add one
Yes,
thing quick.
please.
There are a lot of people who struggle with doing something that you said, which I think is super, super helpful and very important, which is saying that you love yourself. So I love myself. I love you in the mirror. So what I invite people to do is step it back and make it a little bit impersonal. But especially if you have a pet, if you have a dog or a cat, your dog or cat occasionally will look at you and their eyes will smile, and they'll just beam love at you, and you'll feel so appreciated in that moment. So take your mind, your awareness, your sort of intent there, and pretend that you are seeing yourself through your pet's eyes. and see yourself through that filter of love that they're looking. They're just beaming love at you, but you're seeing yourself as they see you. And it'll be a little easier to connect with that feeling of loving yourself. So I just had to say that.
I love that. And so, of course, on YouTube, they're like, what about glaucoma? So glaucoma is next. So glaucoma, just as a quick, or we didn't do that with cataracts. Cataract is a clouding of the lens, of the inner lens in the eye. Glaucoma is related to, basically it's nerve damage, and it's related to the intraocular pressure. Just like you have blood pressure in your, veins and arteries, you have pressure inside your eyeball. And glaucoma, there's many different kinds. We did a whole episode on that, separate one. But in most cases, the intraocular pressure is too high. So think of like how high blood pressure is not good. And then there is a few cases of glaucoma where the pressure is normal, but there is still a problem with pressure. So glaucoma, from an anatomical standpoint, is related to pressure in the eyeball on the anatomical level, which leads to deterioration of the optic disc. Let me get my little eyeball just to show everybody, because I didn't know those things when I first learned this. So when you look at the eye, so this is the macula. We're going to come to macular degeneration next, but this is the optic nerve. This connects to the brain, to the visual cortex, where you see. And this is what the eye doctor sees. They see this round optic disc. And in glaucoma, because of the pressure when it's too high, it's like if you really push, the disc is kind of going in like a cup. They call it about cupping, how they can see how cupped it is. And that is one indicator also. And what you lose in glaucoma, visually speaking, you lose your peripheral field. So your life becomes more of a tunnel vision, this experience versus this big open space. Okay, so enough about that. Tell us a little bit what you've noticed with glaucoma people, like what's going on emotionally.
Think tension and think pressure. And this can be like actual pressure where you have stress in your life, in your work career, in your home, in your family life, in the world. Or it could just strictly be what you're thinking about those things, like your thoughts about that stuff. Are you driving yourself crazy with stress? And I will say this. So my best friend had, true story, my best friend has had this, got diagnosed with this, and she told me about it over lunch. This is about a year and a half ago. And she was in early stage glaucoma, and I think she's in her late 50s. And the doctors were really concerned. And it literally was job stress that was getting to her. And she couldn't control what was going on at work, and it was driving her crazy. And she was just like mental, emotional. It was tension in her mind, tension in her body, wanting to control the stuff that she couldn't control. And I was like, we can work on this. And so I taught her some of the practices that I know from naturally clear vision, and said, you got to address the stress and work on it. And she did all of those things, and she completely reversed it.
That's
So,
amazing. I mean, we had so many people in natural vision, like where the eye doctor actually measured the huge drop in the intraocular pressure. So
yeah.
Louise Hay always talks also about in glaucoma, like unforgiveness, stony unforgiveness,
Oh yeah.
where, you had a rift with somebody and you just
Yep.
cannot let go. And
Yep.
so do yourself a favor, like sometimes even helping with energy healing, where you imagine a cord between you two and you literally cut it like a umbilical cord in the baby, like letting go of that. And I also noticed, that's why I always said to my cousin who's an ophthalmologist, oh my God, I feel like I'm such a perfectionist sometimes, but goes hand in hand with the presbyopia and the farsightedness, and always, doing everything right and being like a workaholic. But I have lots of joy in my life. So I think, but anyway, so there is also this kind of, all the ducks have to be in a row, and the house has to be clean, and everything has to be perfect. And if
Yep.
there's even a spot of dirt somewhere, definitely I like the clean house thing. But, giving yourself a little permission to maybe, don't be so Marie Kondo perfect. So that would be helpful. Before we get into the tips on your end for glaucoma, um, like, because what we skipped over, and I forgot, I wanted to ask you this, because we also see a connection, I think, in presbyopia, especially with clutter, where, you might be moving, and, or even with nearsightedness, where I see you did a whole episode on this, where people have a lot of clutter, and you literally don't want to see that, because it's like every time you're like, oh God, I got to give this to Goodwill or do something about it or donate it. But then nobody wants clothes right now. What do I do with all these things? Can you, sorry, quickly backtrack a little bit? What have you noticed with, like, when you're really cluttered spaces? Have you found that to be a specific vision challenge, or is it more like a general sign of people with some vision challenges?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure. It has come up a bunch of times in sessions, and it's not even, sometimes it's me sensing it, but sometimes it's also the person being like, I just have so much stuff. And what comes out of that sensing wise is that they don't want to see it. Like
Yeah.
they walk into a room and they feel tired because there's all this stuff, and the stuff, because stuff has energy, whether it's stacks of books or papers, or you're, somebody passed away, now you got to go through their stuff in their storage unit or whatever. But it's like you don't want to, if you don't want to, if you say to yourself, I don't want to see that, watch your languaging, because that's going to be something it's going to affect your vision, even if you don't think it is. I'm telling you, it is. It's so, the language, you really have to be so careful with that. But clutter is a big one, and it's not easy. It's not always easy to get to declutter. It is for some of the mental people who are really good in their heads and they're good with logic. But if you're emotional based and you're sentimental, then things are like, I can't give that away. Like, grandmother,
That's so me. That's so me. And my sister is just like, boom, boom, put it away. So I think sometimes having hiring, there's so many great companies that do professional, and they will ask you and make sure that they don't throw anything away, or that you make these piles. My sister helped me because moving a couple of times. So recognize when you have a problem with this, and I'm the first one to raise my finger. And not that my place is cluttered, but just giving things away. It's always, I know the second I give it away, I will need this every time. And then I tell myself, no, I can't give it away. So having sometimes professional help. But let's get back to glaucoma. So there is this idea of putting too much pressure on yourself, perfectionism, stony unforgiveness, like, whatever, you get so absorbed about all the things. What are the tips that you can give everybody with glaucoma, or like who feels like this is so me? What can I do?
It's really about being attached. I mean, you're attached to how the way that you think things should be and the way that you think people should be. And so it's and how you should be. So it's, if you can relax that and begin to, I don't want to say practice detachment like you don't care, but practice not letting the world bother you. And so really cultivating, so this is where the meditation guy that you were talking about, David, that's a really good one. So listening to his program, getting calm, getting centered, being like, I am okay. I am the eye in the storm. I am the quiet center of peace, and not letting the world bug you. Like, not, so I'm just going to be, I'm going to go through life and things are going to be okay. And if there's a little bump that comes along, I will figure it out. And I'm not going to be attached to the things that I can't control. If you can't control it and you're attached to it being a certain way, it's a recipe for misery.
Well, YouTubers are already there, jumping the gun. Like, of course, the next question is, can you speak about detached retina? But there was also a question, is the vagus nerve implicated in glaucoma? I don't know the exact answer to this. Obviously, the vagus nerve is the biggest wandering nerve of the parasympathetic relaxation nervous system, which in vision improvement, we always call relaxation is the number one thing to improve your vision. So, and that's why so many vision, like an emotional thing is also a stress factor. So when I always say the root cause is stress, and the stress can be emotional, it could be physical, it could be mental. And then, so we're talking about the emotional aspect mainly today. But if you're in that emotional tension and that stress level, you will not be in the parasympathetic nervous system. You will be chronically in the sympathetic fight or flight mode. In that case, so the vagus nerve needs to be more, I don't like the word stimulated, but encouraged. So we will have somebody on very soon talking about sound and music, and you can even do things like humming and do things that help you get into that relaxed state. Touching yourself, humming Om in yoga those are all things that can help. So there is a connection to the vagus nerve in terms of not being in a real, like, if you're being in the stress state, but that almost goes for all the vision conditions, not just glaucoma. So let's talk about, because obviously we talked about with glaucoma, you're too attached to your stuff. You can't let go. It's like, and again, I'm like, so can hear that. What about retinal detachment or post-vitreous detachment? Let me quickly explain again, and then we will also cover macular degeneration, guys. No worries. So so vitreous in the eyeball, the vitreous is this gel-like structure that holds the eyeball together. And at some point, there could be something called vitreous detachment, and it basically is the jelly detaching itself from the back of the eye, the retina, and that's called post-vitreous detachment. that is in most cases not as severe or dangerous as retinal detachment. So, but it could also be a precursor. So sometimes the vitreous and the retina are like glued together like super glue, but then there is shrinking and there's activity. Maybe it's also heavy bouncing or whatever it is, trauma. So there could also be where the vitreous and the retina are so glued together that the whole thing pulls away. And then that's retinal detachment. That's when you have actually black spots in your vision. You don't see anything. Versus with post-vitreous detachment, it's more like maybe a half moon of like a light on the sides, usually on the eye, where you see a little like half moon shaped light flash. That's usually post-vitreous detachment. But if you have actual black spots in your eyes, that's usually retinal detachment. So let's talk about that before we get to macular degeneration a little bit. What have you noticed with retinal detachment?
So I can speak from at least 3 different personal stories. So we had one of our Clear Vision Wednesday speakers in the past was talking about grief and grieving, and that was Jennifer Farmer, and she talked about her life partner at the time, so it was her boyfriend at the time, and he got the news late one evening that his best friend had been killed in a motorcycle accident, and he super healthy guy, the boyfriend of hers was in his I think 30s or 40s, but he was healthy. Went to bed that night, woke up the next morning and had a detached retina, and it was just the shock of the loss, that it was just like it I don't know if it's what the exact emotional causation is behind the vitreous detachment or the retinal detachment, but it's some kind of like chasm just breaks things up like that. In the case, my dad had detached retina, and he had been laid off of his job, so loss of life purpose, and he had some diabetes issues, and eye issues related to diabetes, but the diabetes made it so that he couldn't go fishing anymore. So he had all these losses one after another. And then he ended up with a retinal detachment too, and went through several military surgeries at the hospitals in San Antonio, but they couldn't fix it, unfortunately. And in the case of you and I, we have a mutual friend who well, in the fall, well, she contacted me. This is actually just a few weeks ago, and told me she had been diagnosed with vitreous detachment, and then it was going into retinal detachment, moving very quickly. And I asked her, I said, okay, what happened? When did this start? And she's like, December. And I said, what happened in October or November? And she was like, well, we had this, I had that. And it was like, it was none of those things. And then finally she says, oh my God, she said, a friend of mine died really unexpectedly, young person. And it was just such a shock. And I was like, and that was it. Like intuitively, I was like, that was the one that had the biggest charge around it. And in that case, she did have the surgery. She is improving. And we did a lot of discussions on, okay, here's all the different practices, and I want you, and right after she had the surgery, she has to have her head tilted and whatnot. But a friend of hers took her on a drive down the Pacific Highway so that she could just look at beautiful things for the entire day and just relax. And I said, you really got to, be super cognizant of not intaking anything negative in your life. Bring in the positives and really love yourself, and tell your eyes like it's okay. Like sometimes our eyes, we might think the thought, I don't want to see that. Like, I don't want to know that. But when you say that, you're affirming something really negative. So I just, even when it's something bad, I'm like, I'm okay seeing that. I'll get through it. I will work through it. It will be all right. So I'm constantly sending my eyes love. It's okay, whatever you're seeing, if even it's something bad or something negative, but just kind of paying attention to how we language to ourselves. And we're going to help. I know you and I are both going to work with our friend to like help her vision, restore her eyesight, so she's all perfect again.
Yeah, and in the Natural Clear Vision, we work through all these things. Trisha, that's what you're doing in these inner game calls that are part of the program. Because like what you said, you find you're really good at finding the charge, like what was the thing? Because we might be like, oh, it could be that, could be that. And then you can kind of just dial into people and really
Yeah,
connect with and then once we know that, then we can, I think it gives us more clues as to what we can do versus like this something happened. I don't know. All right, let's cover. We have a couple more. We are already going for an hour. This is much longer than expected. But let's cover like macular degeneration. And usually there's two different kinds. There's actually a couple different times. One is from birth, genes. One is like related to high levels of nearsightedness. And by the way, nearsightedness can be causing all these other problems too. So nearsightedness is a big trigger for retinal detachment, post-vitreous detachment, glaucoma, cataracts, all these things. So that's why reducing your nearsightedness is really important for keeping your eyes in healthy shape. So with AMD, which is age-related macular degeneration versus myopic macular degeneration. But basically, the macula is this called inside the macula is the fovea lutea, where we have the sharpest vision. So when you look at something, you see it sharp. That's where all the cone cells are, where you have the best color perception. So when you have macular degeneration, you basically losing the ability to see the spot that you're looking at. So if you were looking at my right eye, you would not see my right eye. You would see my nose and my left eye and everything else around it. So it's very, especially when it gets more advanced, and you lose, depending on how big the, deterioration is, you can also lose most of your color perception. So it's a very debilitating disease. And so tell us a little bit about what you found with macular degeneration. Like, what is the kind of feeling, emotion connected to that?
So somewhat similar to cataracts, lack of vision for one's future, having past or even present challenges in life, having a lack of purpose. Like you see this a lot in people who are retired and then they don't have like a second career, like a hobby or something that they can get engaged in that continues to give them a sense of purpose in the world. Losing their friends when their friends either move away or pass away, especially when you get into that 60, 70 range, you start seeing your friends and mentors and colleagues pass away. Losing options in life. Maybe you're losing some mobility. Maybe you have dietary restrictions because you can't eat the same way that you used to
Or you
eat.
can't walk, right? You can't walk
Yeah.
anymore. Or you're not mobile anymore. You're kind of limited in your physical
And
abilities,
you're
which is
dependent
very
on,
sad. Yeah.
yeah, and you're dependent on other people too. And it could be fear of the future as well. I have an example. This is actually a family member too. A man in his early 70s, and he retired from a super adventurous life and did the retirement, had multiple divorces, and his world was like shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And there were more and more limitations on his health and the health of his spouse. And then he ended up with the AMD, and then he was getting the injections. And then a woman I know also has that same thing, like world was retired and it didn't look the way that she wanted it to look. That's a big
Mm.
one. If you're really attached to my life should look like this and it
Oh,
doesn't look
yeah. Okay.
that way, that can cultivate it too. So how you would help it with again, cultivating an excitement about life again, having things to look forward to. I always tell people, I'm like, write down a list of like the big needle movers of what bothers you the most in life. What do you not like? And then circle the ones that you have control over and then address those. Some of them we can say, well, I worry about the, state of the United States or whatever. Well, you can't always have an ability to influence that. Sometimes you can talk to your congressman or whatever, but if you don't release worrying about that, you can say prayers about it and you can send money to causes if you want to, that kind of thing. But your attachment you got to stop, like have a boundary of like, my attachment stops here to how I think things should be, and let it go. Do what you can do and release the rest.
I think that's a big one, expectations, right? Like my mom said, I expect other people to reach out to me, or we have expectations about the holidays. Who doesn't, right? I'm actually the one in my family who always wants like everybody together. And my sister's like, oh, screw that. And it's like having those healthy self boundaries and really, I expectations was a big thing for me, and to be honest. So I remember going through my divorce before I went through my divorce, and I had counseling. This is not related to AMD, but I feel like this is exactly what it is. You have this expectation, but he should be doing this, he should be doing that. And said, you can't expect him to do that. I'm like, wait, what? That's not fair. I'm doing all these things. But it's like the idea of how we think, what you said, we think how things should look like and be like and behave like versus what they actually do. And also, I think Louise said that not really wanting to look, like not really wanting to have that sharp vision, that color vision, because everything is just not as happy and great as you want it to be. So, okay, we are almost done. I think we have like the last few things is like swelling, inflammation of the inner eye nerve or styes or any kind of inflammatory things like styes. So, what have you noticed with those things?
Yeah, anger and frustration and things that you can't control, things
Oh,
outside of
it's
your ability.
heat. It's heat, right? Inflammation is always heat.
Yeah.
So, like, okay.
Yeah. If you feel powerless to make changes and you're attached to the way that you think things should be, and you feel like your input is disregarded, or you don't feel like you have any input at all of those can like translate into that. So in the case of the swelling and inflammation of the inner eye nerve, this is one of those fall naturally clear vision students, or actually, no, I think no, she was in the spring. So she was in the springtime and she had a swollen eye nerve, and pretty serious. I forget the name of it. It was like, it had a more technical name than what I'm giving it right now, but it was inflammation of the eye of the optical nerve. And she used the practices. She did the poly meditations that you have in the thing, and she did the various practices to help herself relax and help herself get balanced, and meditation and breathing and being present moment and not being attached to stuff. And she went back to the eye doctor, and they completely cured that, healed that. And the eye doctor literally, I don't even know if I told you the story. The eye doctor literally said it was a miracle. He said he'd never seen anything like that where that was reversed. He was very concerned about her eye health with that, and she completely reversed it. And the other one with his sty, it's actually my neighbor. My neighbor's a pharmacist. She's super sweet. But she asked me one time, she said, "What do you got for styes?" Because she didn't want to put like the medication on her eye, and actually it wasn't even helping her. And I gave her some of my little tips, but ultimately I said, "Well, what are you angry about? What are you frustrated about?" And she said, "Oh, I've had some clients at the shop that have been not nice to her." And she's like, "They apologized later, but it still was her, it hurt, and she got angry about it, and she got frustrated, and she felt powerless. And she's like, "First I had a sty in this eye, then I had a sty in this eye." So it was like they were swapping places. But I said, gave her some of the tips and some of the things I know from the course, and then taught her a few things, and then said, "You got to work with the emotions," and she did, and it healed. And so it got better.
That's amazing. I mean, we had Dr. Mark Grossman from Natural Eye Care on a few times. He's an optometrist, integrative functional medicine practitioner, Chinese medicine, and he also talks a lot about, in Chinese medicine, the right eye is connected to male analytical, like that thing, and the left eye is more the yin, like the female, the creative side, the soft side. And more often than not, he also found, and I found that as well. So maybe you only have something in one eye. Is there a connection, if it's the right eye, is there connection to some male energy in your life, or a person, or something in the left, more the, or analytical, like where, I had a client once with she also had problems with double vision, and she definitely had a correlation to like something with the and mostly the left eye was the one that wasn't aligning. So where it's like connected to the female, right? There's something wrong with the mother or the sister or somebody else. So yeah, it's been like we've been way over, but hopefully we gotten lots of good comments on YouTube. So here's the thing, we want to invite everybody to join my Natural Vision course. I only do this once or twice a year. We're starting tomorrow. You can join us now, and we will look at all these levels, the physical, the mental, the emotional level, and even the spiritual level. And Trisha is doing these inner game calls that she's so intuitive and finding that, which people really love. So we're doing all the different levels, and it's way more than, I don't even like eye exercise, the word. It's not like rolling your eyes in a circle. It's really learning the deep relaxation of eyes, mind, and body, learning how to use dim light, or how the cells work differently at night, how you adjust your focus to different distances, also measuring your vision, knowing like we need to measure our vision, and we can learn how to order reduced glasses inexpensively online, so that you don't have to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Go see an eye doctor, make sure your eyes are healthy. I always say this, you don't want to do that, especially if you're like over 50 or 60. You want to make sure you go every year to get your eyes checked, so that nothing, because oftentimes diseases are found in the eyes. So an ophthalmologist might find mold or Lyme or diabetes way before anybody else can. So it's a really good way to get your eye health checked. But we encourage you to not leave with these super strong, expensive prescriptions. And that's what we cover in Natural Vision. You learn how to measure things yourself. You can always work together with your eye doctor if that's needed. Right? So, and slowly releasing all these emotions and learning. And that, again, might also need the help of the therapist. It depends on how deep these things are. So sometimes we have to go beyond what we can offer. But it's a great way to understand all these things and be empowered to see clearly into old age and do the things. And we've had so many, I mean, I posted the link on YouTube. You hear so many stories of people like avoiding Fox dystrophy, corneal transplants, to reversing cataracts. And again, this is an early stage, not an advanced stage. But sometimes we are both always like, this is a miracle, like where I don't even think that's possible, and it's possible. But there's no guarantee, because the energetics of your thoughts, like we can't, right, Trisha, we can guide people, but at the end of the day, you have to do the work, so to speak. There is no quick fix. I always say there's no quick fix in health. Hacks, there's no hacks. It's like you really have to do the work. And and be able to face this and look at yourself honestly and look at your feelings and your beliefs and your mindset, all these things. Anything you want to add so that we can, because it's been quite long today. And thank you
Yeah.
for watching, by the way.
Yeah, thank you everyone for watching. I will say this. So when I first was in your orbit and coming in and I started watching I did the free trainings and I watched the webinars and I watched the YouTube videos and all of that. And it took me at least a good year before I actually joined one of the courses. And I want to say this, don't do what I did. Don't wait that long. Join sooner. I really wish I'd started the path sooner, because I talk with so many people who have really serious vision concerns. And I am incredibly grateful that I have the tools and information to circumvent that. I know that I know what not to do and what to do to ensure good vision throughout my entire life. And it is really important. And you can't start earlier than today. Like today is the day. You start
Right.
now, you invest in yourself, you invest in your self-care and your vision, and really you're worth it. Like, think to yourself, you're worth it. The information that you learn in this program, what I have found, and I always say this, but it literally changed my entire life, changed my life vision, changed how I looked at myself, it changed how I viewed the world. It just made everything in my life brighter, better, more healthy, more colorful, more vibrant, more three-dimensional. I mean, it was an expansion of everything. And I see that in our students, and I absolutely love it. Like they literally, you watch them blossom, they turn into completely different people in a better way. Like they become the highest versions of themselves, and we embrace and support that every step of the way. So we are here for you whenever you're ready, but now's the time. It's the best time. Start now.
Thank you. I couldn't have said any better. And, vision goes way beyond the eyeball. And really, like we said, so people sometimes change their careers because they realize with their vision condition that was connected to not being happy at work. And thank you, everybody on YouTube. Hopefully, this was helpful. We saw lots of good comments. And by the way, James, remember James from Togo, who did the program, I think in 2020. So
Oh
he's
yeah, he's so
watching right
nice.
now.
Yeah.
Hi, James. We
Oh, James.
absolutely love that we have an international audience. And
Yeah.
decide for yourself how important is your vision, how important is it for you to see clearly, and how important is it to learn what you can do to keep your eyes healthy into old age. And that is reducing the strength of glasses. We also have nutrition, right? We teach nutrition in this course. Like one of my former students studies nutrition endocrinology, so she's coming on. We give you a lot of information and tips and tools to use in this program, and then you take what you need. And also you will leave with a personalized protocol, the latest version of Natural Clear Vision. We have a blueprint for each vision condition, more on the physical level, what practices to do, and also on the emotional level. And Trisha and here are here to support you all the way through. So today is the last day to join, and we start tomorrow, and the course is 12 weeks, ends in April on April 17th. So thank you everybody for watching, and we will see you next week. So subscribe to this channel if you're watching. Make sure you share with your friends, because there's so much more to vision than this. And while I think but not think, I think it's very important to see your eye doctor to make sure your eyes are healthy. They don't really know those things because that's not what they study, and they are more on the physical level and all these different energies. Eye doctors don't know that, and they will never, I don't think there will be a point. Maybe like people like Mark Grossman, who is very deeply rooted in the emotional states and 5 elements in Chinese medicine, but most eye doctors are not. So anyway, have a great rest of your day, everybody. And we will just do a little bit extra time in our Clear Vision Club now. Goodbye, YouTube. So see you soon. Join Natural Clear Vision, or if at a minimum, subscribe to this channel.